Janek, Gwizdala, how are you doing?
I'm good. Quarantined, but otherwise pretty good, man.
Yes, we have a friend in common, Victor Wooten,
Yep.
and Victor's been a great hero of mine, and has been tremendously supportive, and is such a beautiful human being.
Big time. I mean, I can't help smile. Like I just hear his name and I can't help but smile. You know what I mean? It's like he's such a positive force. At least my experience of him has been that, like such a positive force in my life, and just the way I see him influencing young musicians like everywhere in the world. It's one of those people you can't go anywhere in the world and there's always somebody that knows it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like Will Smith tells a story, right, where he's like somewhere in the middle of China in a rice paddy or something, walking along, and a woman looks up and goes, "Hey, Big Willie," like in the most unlikely place on earth, in the middle of China in the countryside, and Will Smith is a recognizable person. I feel that with Vic, especially when I'm touring and I'm around musicians and bass players, and
No.
yeah, this makes me smile like crazy.
He's had an incredible influence, and not just on bass players. I recently finished uh, my doctorate at CCM, and as part of my one of my research papers, uh, I wrote on the history of live looping,
Oh,
and Victor did an interview, and much of what made it into my research paper was Victor's thoughts,
right.
and of course he's the master of deflecting and always uh, giving credit to other people. When you talk about the double thumbing thing, he always talks about his brother.
Of
His
course,
brother
yeah,
taught him that.
right.
And he's very he's just like that. That's just how he is.
Yeah.
And he's so when I was talking to him about live looping, and of course I know that uh, without Victor Wooten, what we know as live looping wouldn't really exist, at least not in the form that it is, because I can't find anyone that was more significant in the development, of that performance practice.
Sure.
And I'm talking about that because one thing that is interesting about your musicianship is your regular use of loopers,
Sure.
loopers in practicing. I know that you know prior to the quarantine you were touring quite a bit, uh,
Yeah.
kind of a one man band kind of show with the
Yeah.
looper. Can you talk a little bit about the looper in your musicianship, in your development as a musician, in your performing, and then I don't know, maybe talk a little bit about maybe how Victor Wooten may have been somewhat of an influence.
Yeah, I mean, big time. Because I wish I had the record. Actually, you have it on the screen back there, the Show of Hands record. And
Oh,
I bought that. I bought a record at his place, at his camp, when I was out there doing a day of teaching for him. And so that record was hugely influential to me,
yeah,
And that was long before I knew what a loop pedal was. I knew because I think quite early on I'd seen a video of Jaco like going out on stage. It's before I even knew what pedals were, never mind loop pedals. And he would like go out and do this his little 2 bar loop thing, his
right.
solo performance. And I would see him like hit something. I was always curious. I wonder what that was. Never put two and two together that it was a loop, but whatever. But it was Victor's record that really was like, okay, musically influential, even if it wasn't at the time influencing my looping ability, or I didn't even know what looping was then. But it became very apparent very quickly that I'm pretty crazy when it comes to practicing, and to practice the amount I want to in the context that I want to, that the loop pedal was going to be pretty much my most valuable tool.
Mm.
because I wanted to play with a band. I wanted to play against something. I didn't just want to sit there with a metronome or sit there with myself and play solo. So that was huge when we talk about it as a practice tool. Doing it as a one-man band and the whole Last Minute World Tour that happened in 2016 through 2017 was about the reality of being a musician and wanting to play lots of shows, but not having the financial wherewithal take all my favorite musicians with me all over the world, you know? So I would never have played those 75 or 80 shows, like literally all over the world, had it not been for having some sort of looping concept or solo setup, you know? Coming from classical guitar and coming from somewhat of a chordal approach with the instrument, I have, maybe I'll give myself 25 minutes of interesting stuff that I could play without a looper, but this doesn't make a show, you know? So I needed something else. I needed an ability to build and to stack and to sample and record. So that was how the double looper thing came, you know, making an idea and then sampling that and increasing that and piping it back around and just using it as a multi-track recorder, basically. But yeah, that's kind of how it came about, why it came about, and it's something I'm literally looking down at my pedal board right here. I have two loopers. I have a looper here. I have two loopers there. They're just everywhere, like probably in every room of the house. I know my wife has one up in her office. It's loopers everywhere.
Speaking of your wife, you guys do a sort of a podcast style video series called Two
Yep,
Bass Hit.
absolutely.
What inspired that? I mean, it's got to be like a really fulfilling thing. First of all, your wife is a bass player,
Right.
so you can have those kind of conversations, and then secondly, to be able to collaborate on a video series like that.
Yeah, well, so we obviously we talk to each other every day, and sometimes, let's say all the time, it's mainly about bass. So it's not mainly about bass, but we talk enough about music and the bass, and we do enough stuff that's, I guess, interesting enough to talk about and share with people that we were like, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we share these conversations that we kind of have on a Sunday evening anyway? And put it out there. And it gives us a chance, or it has given us a chance to connect with a bunch of awesome people because the comments and the feedback and the conversation has been amazing. It gives us an opportunity to be vulnerable a little bit, especially with our latest episode that we did this Sunday was super tough and highlighted how little I knew and how much more work I need to do. And kind of really showed our difference of upbringing and cultural background and how different it is to be white and to be from another country and
Hmm.
to be experiencing what is going on right now. So like to be able to have that together as husband and wife and to be able to share that with people kind of honestly and openly and have the conversation, I think that's kind of priceless. I mean, like what you're doing here with your video series, like anyone who can be honest and engage in a conversation and then share that with the public, you know, without caring like what people think or what the perception might be, to just be open and be
Hmm.
honest. I think that's why we do that. I think that's why I do anything actually. If it, that's why I play music. Apart from the fact that music has saved me in so many ways, I think that's what I've got to a point now where that's why I play music. Is because it's the place I can be honest and the place where I'm most well equipped to express myself honestly. You know?
I've heard you say that several times that music saved you, that it was a critical force in your youth that sort of changed the trajectory, changed the path of your life.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah. I mean, so so I have maybe a slightly unconventional upbringing. Let's say, having been homeschooled and having been through like a bunch of different weird pursuits at an early age. Uh, and kind of the music thing gave me, it was there from about, actually physically doing it from about 10 or 11 years old, even if that wasn't my main focus as kind of early teens. It started to get really serious like 14, 15, 16 when I picked up the bass at 15. Um, but it kind of just solidified all these things I was feeling into one place. It took this kind of chaotic, divorced family, coming from a super poor neighborhood, having very little access to means or to anything really growing up as a kid. And suddenly it was like, oh, this thing is actually quite simple. I understand it and I have an immediate connection with it. And it's something I'm hungry to pursue. And it also gave me a way sort of out of where I was. Like I wasn't in love with my surroundings by any stretch of the imagination. And uh, be that certain family things or just literal geographic location and uh, state of local affairs where I was, for want of a better way to put it. Just not a great place to be. And music kind of gave me the way to fulfill like all of these curiosities, to to remain curious rather than get stuck into like get on a set of rails and go down that track doing whatever job, like insert name of job here for the next 40 years.
Mm.
Because that was a very real possibility. It's like, okay, yeah, I could go and work in this job and just stay in that and never experience all of this other stuff. So in terms of like some childhood trauma and then the state of where I grew up, in that sense, it saved me in a big way. And it allowed me to meet and connect with a whole bunch of people I would never have even realized existed. Never mind form friendships and relationships and working relationships with.
I can't remember which interview, but I was talking to one of my guests about how. Oh, I do remember it was Phil Marsh,
Okay.
and Phil is a great guitar player, and he's the leader of a band that I used to play in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called the Hip Pocket.
Okay.
And I was I was just thinking of that. I can't think of another career path, um, another kind of association, that I could have made so many instant friends.
Right.
Like you meet one time, you play one gig,
Yeah.
you know, and then it's like even if you don't see the person for a while,
For
for a
20
long
years.
time,
20
yeah,
years.
it's
There are
like
people
you.
that I haven't seen for 20 years. I literally called one of them yes 2 days ago. Amazing drummer that taught me a lot about life and about music, and someone I worked with a lot in London, and I hadn't
Mhm.
spoken to him for a really long time. And it was like we had never been apart, you know?
Yeah,
And I also think that speaks hugely towards the power of that universal language, though.
right,
Because, like, I can go play a jam session in Thailand or Argentina or in Brooklyn. It doesn't matter. We're all speaking the same 12 notes for the most
right.
part in Western tempered music. Uh, and there it is. You don't have to say anything. So I think that speaks volumes to that.
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing, music. Um, it's something that uh, I'm stuck with it, in the best possible way.
Right.
Like I uh, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I would be totally miserable without it. Um, and it has facilitated every good thing in my life. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
for
just the
sure.
fact. I mean,
No, I feel the
I
same way.
I met my wife because of music. Everything that I own is because of music. Every
Right.
opportunity that I've had, all of my greatest moments have been, you know, involved in music.
Sure.
Um, yeah, it's just um, such a beautiful, just such a beautiful thing. Um, you know, one thing about you that is unusual is uh, your uh, practice discipline. Now I've heard you talk about it. You know, I, you know, I'm a music professor at Ohio State, and I
Right.
teach saxophone there, right? And I've had a lot of students, and I know what people's tendencies are as far when it comes to practicing,
Right.
and
Right.
how much time they're actually spending working on something versus kind of playing around. And uh, I mean, I knew that you were uh, a vigorous practicer even before having seen this series of videos that you started called the Practice Room.
Oh yeah.
But those videos where it's a really kind of a raw, naked, kind of in depth, you're kind of showing, you know, how the sausage is made, so to
Yeah.
speak. You know,
It's pretty ugly at times.
well, I mean, I think it's I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful to be willing to show that and to share that information, because there's a lot of things that a lot of people won't tell you along your
Well,
journey.
especially now, especially now with social media and the culture of instant gratification and wanting to
Mhm.
showcase the best of yourself or whatever that is, you know. But the best of yourself isn't in the middle of practicing for 6 hours a day. Often you
Mhm.
find like the worst of yourself there, and that's where you learn from, right? So
Yeah. Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
it's only fair to your audience to show the whole thing. You know, maybe I share a little too much. Okay, okay, okay. But you know, I also go out and play live and share the other side of it, where I'm really concentrating and I'm conscious of the audience and telling a story, and I'm very much in performance mode, and I do want the performance to be the best that it can be. Not that I don't want my practice to be the best that it can be, but I'm so much more kind of exploratory in the microcosms of the, you know, of the technique when I'm in my practice routine, rather than when
Mhm.
I'm on a gig. So I think it's important to share. You know?
It- yeah, I mean, you know, practicing is it's different than performing, right? I interviewed Walt Weiskopf, and something I learned from him was that, I mean, he would always say this, and I heard him say this a lot: never perform in the practice room. You know,
Okay.
never perform in the practice room. And it's all about, because the practice room is sort of like where you struggle on things that you can't play, and if you don't give yourself the liberty and freedom to do that, you'll never get any better. If
Yeah.
you just get in the practice room and just play all things that you can play, obviously you need to warm
Yeah.
up. You have to do things to get yourself
For
to the
sure.
place where you can start doing the
Yeah.
work. But it has to be about the work, and can't be about, you know, being at a university. Students face this sort of temptation because of the way that the practice rooms are situated, and the
Okay.
temptation is to try to sound as good as possible all the time in the
Oh,
practice
because
room,
other
because
people can
other people
hear
can
them.
hear them.
Ah, it's so bad.
You know,
Yeah.
and
So you're only playing all your fast best licks for everyone who's walking by, right?
that's right. It's a real temptation. I face that same temptation. I'm human.
Right, right,
You
right.
know, so
Of course.
right, I face the same temptation, and so I understand that. But you know, I've heard you talk about practice. I don't know that I've watched every one of the episodes of the practice
Oh,
room,
I
but
hope not.
I've watched more than half of them, though.
Wow.
I've watched more than half of them,
Wow.
and honestly, those videos, I wish I thought of that. That is such a great idea, by the way. I wish I thought of that. But something that I started doing was inspired by those videos, and that was to do these videos I do called hot licks.
Okay.
So I've been doing them one a day since December, sometime in December.
Okay.
And so I'm like up to 176 or something.
Sure.
And I wanted to do something that maybe showed some of my versatility. I play different instruments, something that would force me to have to sit down and refine something so that I could get it ready to play.
Right.
And and you know, everybody's on social media. Students are on social media.
Right.
So I just wanted to try to be part of doing something positive to create some kind of inspirational, content, that kind of thing. But all of that was inspired by those videos I saw you do, because I was like, this is such a great idea. And one thing I noticed about your videos was that, so, the practice room, the first video, by the time you got to 20 or 25, looking back at the number of views that the first, the second, and the third video received. Yeah. So what started happening is people started to know, oh, this is what I'm. Oh, yeah, I want to check this out. I want to deal with this. And then, as is the case with a lot of videos that are in a series, if they caught you at episode 35, they're going to be like, hey, man, I got to go back and watch 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, there's
like
a little
this.
bit of that for sure.
Yeah, and so I just thought that it's a terrific idea. And I mean, even if it was just for that, but obviously the real reason to do it, I think, was to share that information to folks, to show them what, here are some things that really should be taking place in the practice room. And if you're not doing some of these things, here are some ideas. So I just thought that was really great.
And there are a lot of people who kind of preach their own thing as teachers, especially in the bass and the guitar community. They preach as very, like, it's this way or no way. It's a very selfish way of presenting material, you know what I mean? So I'm always trying to be like, so people can see in from 360 degrees. I like, this is my way, And as you can see, sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. I'm always of the opinion of, you might want to check this out. It could be great for you. It could be awful, but just give both sides a chance. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of helped that narrative perhaps a little bit.
Also, I've noticed that over time, you've both been extremely consistent with your videos, a lot more consistent than, well, just very consistent. You've just been very consistent. Lots of content. For a period of time, you did, almost for a whole year, you did like a vlog.
311 days consecutive.
Yeah, that's that's pretty amazing, man.
I was trying to make it to 365 consecutive, but I was also trying to stay in a relationship at the same time. So one had to give, and I chose my wife.
Right.
But yeah, it started out as a discipline thing. It started out as not knowing how to produce a movie every day, how to edit, how to make a soundtrack, how to color, how to do all these things, technical things. And it was obviously inspired by Casey Neistat and this whole movement of YouTubers. And at the same time, it was more so than that. It was a personal challenge to myself to develop another skill set so that I had another thing that was completely second nature. And even now, there are so many holes in my ability to color grade footage, for instance, or to edit, or like all of these little technical things, to the point where I'm going to start hiring someone to do that because I want to take things to the next level. But as an exercise, it was amazing, and it taught me ever such a lot. Even if it taught me, hey man, you should really hire someone else, it was still worth doing, And with the consistency thing, I think I learned that super early on. Like my base teaching website online presence thing started in 2010. So I'm already a decade into it. And it was just with my few subscribers and bass players that were subscribing to the site and becoming students. It was about feeding the information on a regular basis. It was a minimum of once a week, quite often more. And that kind of keeps the conversation alive, you
Yeah.
know? It's not about look at me and I have this fancy thing and, look at me, I need to be relevant, or look at me and love me. It's more about engaging an audience and keeping the conversation alive and listening to the audience,
Yeah.
not pandering, because I don't think that's too healthy, but listening to the audience and making sure you have like an open dialogue as much as you possibly can. You know?
Yeah, with the consistency thing, one thing you were talking about, even if it teaches you that you maybe want to hire someone to do it. Uh, One thing that I've noticed about any any place that I've worked at, the people that I tend to respect the most and get the most out of tend to be the people, as far as people that are my boss, tend to be the people that they weren't sort of transplanted. They sort of worked their way up through
Okay,
whatever the company was.
sure.
And so then therefore they understand with a level of precision all of these different jobs
Every
that
level, right?
right.
Yeah,
And so having that knowledge is going to end up making you better at picking whoever it is that
sure.
was going to do the editing, and to give them a certain kind of feedback that's going to make them feel probably more valuable and probably be willing to really put their best foot forward all the time, because
For
they want
sure.
to please you, because they
Yeah,
they know that you actually dig what it is that they're doing.
right.
You know.
And it definitely speaks towards leadership attributes like that, for sure. But at the same time, I have to be so conscious of the micromanaging thing and the overmanaging and the overleading thing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have to find that balance once I do bring someone else in to work on that. That yes, you're 100% right. I do know a lot of those levels now, and I can give really good feedback, but then not to be too much. You know what I
Right.
mean? Not to be like that boss. Like I don't want to be
Yeah.
that guy at all. I want to let someone breathe and do their own thing. So that's something that is coming to me that is going to be very new,
Mm-hmm.
like having like a team essentially. Like it's not just a video person that I want to expand a lot of things with what I'm doing and really maximize the potential of some of these ideas. I don't want
Yeah.
the practice room to just stay this little compartmentalized podcast video thing. I think there's some mileage in there for some other stuff. So yes, definitely I know the next 6 to 12 months is yet another huge learning curve, with a completely different set of goggles on. Just learning a whole new skill set for sure.
All right. So, I mentioned the video series, The Practice Room, and I think if people want to dive deeper into the kind of things that you practice, I think that they can go there.
For sure.
However, I do want to ask you a question about uh, if what are you practicing, like what have you been practicing this week?
Well,
Like what have you been working on? Like what what are you struggling with right now?
that's the real question right there. Uh, let's see. I'm looking at my base, trying to like it's going to tell me. What am I struggling with right now? My mind has gone totally blank. Yeah, I know there are 50 things I've been struggling with because I was working on them just this morning.
No, I just saw
Hmm.
I just saw a video where you're transcribing something and it's like an 18:4
Oh, yeah, yeah,
volume. You're
yeah.
playing it 100 times.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there are definitely things like that. That's a great example, for instance. So Adam Rogers, a great guitar player out of New York City. Um, I have some amazing bootlegs of him playing with Michael Brecker, and I was transcribing a guitar solo, and I actually screwed up the title of that video because it's not 18:4 as a time signature. it's 18
Notes
over 4 as a
and
ratio.
right, right.
You know what I mean? And I think
Hmm.
I did spell it correctly because I put a colon. So it's
Yeah.
18:4, but the way I talked about it, it sounded more like a time signature. Anyway, thankfully I've publicly cleared that up now. Anyway, so that thing, yeah, I still can't play it. I have a thing called the transcription vault on my lesson website, and I really wanted to add that solo to it. And I talked about adding that solo to it, but I also wanted to be able to play it for people as well. And this is like I've come to the realization that I can't play it, you know, and I could if I spent weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks working on it, I could play it, but I also have to look at like where's the balance in value in that. Is that something that's actually going to be a part of my playing, or that I even want as part of my playing, or was it kind of a curiosity, kind of a little itch that I scratched and like, okay, I figured out what it was, I transcribed it, I know what was happening. Can I physically play it? Actually, I can't, and move on. You know, there's so much other value in that solo that isn't an 18:4 ratio. There's so much other beautiful playing and melodic content that I will add that to the transcription vault, for instance, and I will get that into my playing. So I will get massive value out of it, despite the fact that that entire video I made about playing that thing 100 times, it didn't actually pan out. But at the same time, I love the work, you know?
Mm.
Like I really love doing the work. I played that thing like the video showed 100 times. I probably played it, I don't know, 2 or 3 thousand times, that one lick, over and over
Mm.
and over and over again in the space of a few days around when I was shooting that video. So yeah, I love doing the work. So it's, even though I can't actually play that lick, man, it helped my technique like crazy. You
Mm.
know? Fluidity and the syncing of my right and my left hand and playing across the bar line and the, like hemiola stuff, all kinds of stuff, despite the fact that I didn't actually attain the goal, you know? And I think a
It,
lot of people don't think like that. Like it's like they
mm.
get frustrated because they don't reach the goal, but they don't realize what they actually got out of the process, you know?
There's a little bit of that loving or not despising the journey. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, trying to be in the moment and enjoy the process. Um, uh, one sometimes I hear folks talk about um, playing music. Like it's not the agenda or the goal is not just to get to the end.
Yeah,
Hopefully that's not
there is no end, I hope.
well, I mean, even to the end of a piece of music, like
Okay.
like so the so hopefully that's not like you're on this gig and like I just can't wait to get to the end. I just can't wait to get to the end. That's not
Right.
that's not that great. Hopefully
Yeah.
you're like so enraptured with what's going on that when the end happens, it's almost like I
Right.
could have we could have kept going.
For
I was in
sure.
that.
You always
Yeah,
feel that on a good gig, right?
yeah.
You know? And I think so many people, it's because of the filter through which they see their new heroes, the new heroes of today, the Instagram famous, the Instagram musicians, the YouTube musicians, through because of that filter that young musicians see that, I think it gets sensationalized a lot. And I think
Mm,
the goals get targeted more than the process,
mm,
which is a drag, you know? So you will naturally, I believe you will naturally want to keep going at the end of the gig and play 4 encores. If your process is such that you still want to go home and practice afterwards, or you want to practice the next day, or you want to find new things. I think if you're just only exposed to 15 to 45-second clips of like extreme greatness, whatever that is, it gets a little confusing, you know, it gets a little blurry. You know,
mm.
where is the path? I think the path is very defined. But for me, that's because I came from a place of listening to music, listening being the important word there, not watching music, but listening to music. Because I'm guessing it's the same for you. Like we would maybe see some music on the TV,
Hmm.
but the moments I remember the most are when I went to see a live show. Right? You remember
Yeah,
those great live shows. But
yeah,
how much did you see live shows compared to the amount you listened to audio recordings? It was
right.
tiny fraction, right? So I think we both come from a place where we listened to so much music and we were so hungry to figure out what that was that
Hmm.
we did. You know, we
Yeah,
didn't have not only the artist, but 35 other drummers explaining the sticking of a Mike Mangini Dream Theater song or a Billy Cobham Mahavishnu fill. Like,
yeah,
access
yeah,
is too much. Is too
yeah,
much. You know, in three
yeah.
seconds you can have the answer to everything, and that answer needs to be more like 3 years away than 3 seconds for you to actually get in the good habit of doing the work and finding solutions to your own problems rather than being spoon fed them. You know.
Yeah, yeah, yes,
Sorry,
yes.
rant over,
You,
but
you,
that's
no,
how I
no, no,
kind of
no,
see
no, 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 no.
it.
You're speaking my language. You're speaking my
Okay.
language. I'm 45. I don't know.
I'm
I don't
41,
know. You're 41. Okay, so
so
we're
similar. Yeah.
similar in age. So I
Yep.
think that we're both old enough to still have that appreciation of, so stuff wasn't free. Like everything
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
free. You couldn't just get everything. You had
Remember
to
saving up for
actually,
a record?
yeah, yeah,
You had to save up to buy CDs and records, and then
that's
you
right.
were really like like I want five, but I can afford two. And you'd be like, oh, you'd be like in the. I remember being in the record store, like, am I going to get the Miles? Am I going to get the Jack Johnson? Or am I going
Mm,
to get the John McLaughlin? What am I going to get? And then when you got home, you listen to every second of that record
that's right.
thousands of times.
That's right.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, and there's a social thing also that I feel like often my students are missing out on. And that is, it's just I just got this Coltrane record. Let's get a pizza and let's just go listen.
Yes. You've
You
just
know?
described my entire time going to music school,
Yeah.
right? Like going to the cutout store, like, what's this new Coltrane thing? Exactly that. I mean, when you said Coltrane, I'm thinking like Walter Smith and Kendrick Scott and Jaleel Shaw and Bob Reynolds, all the cats, and us just talking about the new record. Did you hear Jeff Tain Watts on the new Mike Brecker record, for instance? We'd be
Right.
sitting there talking about a drum fill of Jeff Tain Watts for an hour in the lobby. You
Mm-hmm.
know, doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. I mean, uh, this thing about too much information, uh, too easy to access this information. That thing is kind of a meme almost. Do you know it or do you Google know it? um,
Exactly.
and I suppose there is a particular skill set for understanding how a search engine works and which terms will likely lead you to your desired destination. However, if someone is asking you that probably means that you don't know it.
Right. Right.
And
And at the same time, sorry to interrupt. Just at the same time, there's a good argument for certain things about it's actually healthier to Google know something because you crowd your hard drive a little less with information that is not essential to your process and to improving your process and your problem solving ability. So,
mhm,
like, yeah, a certain historical event that took place, say, 700 years ago or something in some ancient land, you're like, okay, do I really need to remember that? Right.
right,
And if I've got this supercomputer in my hand, why not just access it that way the one time in my entire life that I need to know it?
right,
But being able to hear a pentatonic four note cell, in real time and not have some digital slowdown app, because you can't hear what John Coltrane's doing on a solo. I mean, I got no time for that. Zero
mm,
time for that.
right.
That's crazy. And it's amazing also that so many students want to be told how good they are. This is amazing to me. It's like, I'm probably not going to do that if you come for a lesson with me. I'm not going to be mean at all. I am going to try and inspire and encourage you in every way I can possibly find. But I'm not going to tell you how great you are, you know, because I don't think that at the end of the day that's motivating. And if you find that motivating, you're probably in the wrong line of business, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. you know, sit on the couch, take this pill, sit on the couch. Don't change your diet. Don't go to the gym and lose the weight.
Yeah.
You know, there's that sort of almost expectation that people have. Um, and I guess I kind of know where that came from, but it's just that takes all the joy. That would take all the joy out of everything, because if you can accomplish things without after having to actually do the work, where's the meaning in that?
Right. And also, where is your natural reactive skill set then in the moment?
Mm,
How do you really exist in the moment and interact on the level that great musicians interact on?
yeah,
You know, if you haven't done the work, it's obvious. You hear in two notes the person
right,
who hasn't done the work. You
right.
know, you hear in two notes the person who bought the Omni book but didn't actually listen to the record. You
Hmm.
know, you, who learned ornithology from the album or from the book? I can tell you instantly. I will have 100% success rate on my downbeat blindfold test if it was just about that. You know, like
Oh.
because yeah, it's pretty crazy how that is really a thing now.
And it's one thing that's interesting is that with as hypersensitive as people seem to be about people being authentic and not being hypocrites and not being, phonies, it seems like audiences, if they know the intricacies of what it is that we do or not, it still seems like they can tell if it's baloney. If the person is not invested in it, if they're not really behind what they're doing. So is hypersensitive as it seems like our society has become to authenticity, it just is also strange that this dynamic also exists because they don't
Yeah,
seem to go together.
yeah. And I think I've seen, and I think this is like a generational thing perhaps as well, is that there are so many people doing and this is, by the way, not a very popular opinion. There are so many people doing a really bad rehash job of some stuff that happened in the 70s and being really famous for it. And it's terrible. I mean, it is terrible with a capital T and all the other letters that are in that word. But the audience laps it up because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
Because that is what is piped into their feed because said artist or bands or whatever have 500,000 followers. Their entire audience is plugged directly into their mains outlet, so they see what they're fed and they forget that, like, Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters existed, or like original Weather Report, like and like Mahavishnu Carbon, like what an innovator of this thing. And he's kind of like, there are people doing a really poor job of like sounding like Billy Cobham these days, and people lap it up like Billy Cobham never existed.
Well, it's like there's like a difference between sophistication of an audience, you know, uh, an audience that has done their homework, an audience that knows these different recordings,
Sure.
and an audience that has a good BS detector.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so there's not really a good segue to the next
Oh,
thing that I want to
okay.
talk to you about.
All
So
right.
we're just gonna go. We're just gonna go
Go
to
for
it.
it.
I,
Take a
I,
left.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm really digging the conversation. Um, you know, I'm glad that that you said some of the things that you said because they're things that I've thought for a long time.
Cool.
So, um, so I want to talk to you about maybe some bands that you play in and or that you have played in, and maybe some highlight moments, some and maybe even some pivotal and like critical moments in your journey.
Sure. It's definitely going to be more bands that I have played in because I don't do anything anymore. That's like,
Mhm.
like my gigging scene, even before this whole pandemic and everything. Not, I tell you, like, pivotal. You mentioned pivotal, yes. Up until 2010, the end of 2010, I was very much like active in the sideman pop, R&B, smooth jazz, gospel, funk, you name it, sideman touring world. Being a bass player, more often than not being a musical director, and being on the road with an artist a lot. For 10 years I did this. And that year, 2010, I played 300 shows in one year.
Wow.
And on top of those shows, I probably did about another 250 or 300 radio shows in the same year, actually playing guitar, playing the single as the musical director, go to radio every day, play a live show the same night. Anyway, long year of work, not particularly well paid. Uh, Highlights, lowlights, as every long venture generally has, and got to the end of the year and really didn't have a lot to show for it. Partly through my own lack of ability to negotiate a contract or a salary that was worth doing it for, and partly because that scene just didn't, even then, it certainly doesn't now, pay any money. And just in that moment, I put out, it's far away, I put out a book called You're a Musician, Now What? I did that in about 2011, 2012, something like that, basically talking about this story, about ending my life as a sideman musician in the commercial music world and becoming my own boss. And the realization I came to was A, that it just didn't pay. And B, not only did it not pay, but I was spending every ounce of energy I had and every day of my life on the road promoting somebody else's work.
Mhm.
So that didn't really jive well with me mentally. And once I figured that out, what I actually wanted to call that book was Next Month's Rent. Because in December of 2010, I didn't have January of 2011's rent. And I had just come off some of the biggest stages, TV shows, the most ridiculous, if you looked at it on paper, successful year of my life as a musician. And it was all BS when it came down to being a human being, an actual life, you know?
Mhm.
So those were like the realizations. That's why I started right then videobaselessons.tv and managed to create its income and managed to be able to say no to the next offer of a tour, which was coming right away in January. So I slept maybe 11 nights in my own bed in 2010, and I was basically offered the same thing to go out and do the same thing the next year with another artist. And that was when I said, okay, that big pivotal moment, I just said, can't do it. Um, Pretty scary because I had no idea at the time how the digital thing was going to go. Thankfully, it worked out. And I dove into that lane and did a lot of studying and made it work for me and made it my option to say no. And by about June or July of that year, about 6 months into it, I could say no to every single gig of the year. Like I literally didn't have to go out and play music anymore to earn a living because I was still being a musician, but through the website and through teaching bass, I was able to have a career and just be a little bit happier, you know, and spend time at home and do important psychological work, for myself. So that's a big pivot point in my career for sure. But then some of the people I've been lucky enough to play with, it's like I get goosebumps thinking about it. That I sometimes, if there wasn't video footage of it, I might not even believe it happened. You know, I also remember like that thing when you're young and things are starting to happen, and you commit to one thing, and then the thing you've been waiting for your entire life comes along, and you can't do it. But the thing you committed to is also awesome, and like it's just that thing. I remember that happening a few times. The biggest one of all for me was I committed to like a 7-week tour with this guy Jojo Mayer, great drummer, kind
Mhm.
of live
Yeah.
electronic drummer. So his band Nerve, huge tour, Southeast Asia and Europe, amazing. I did the tour. I committed to it and I did it. And it was phenomenal. And about a week after I committed to it and flights were bought and everything was set, Mike Stern called me to do a trio gig with Dennis Chambers. Dennis Chambers is one of the biggest reasons I moved to America. I saw Dennis Chambers and James Genus and the Brecker brothers, George Whitty and Mike Stern and the Brecker brothers, the live from Barcelona, 1994, 2 or Return of the Brecker Brothers tour. They have that one. It was a VHS, that one VHS that I wore out, and I said, I want to move to America. I want to play with all of the guys in this band, and most importantly, I want to be like that bass player, and I want to play with that drummer. Like, those are my biggest dreams. So when Mike called me to do, and it was literally one gig, and it destroyed me. I was in tears, like, and I was such good friends with Jojo, and Jojo was like, "Man, I'm so sorry," and I totally understand. And him and Dennis are such good friends, and we all laugh about it like 20 years later. But it was a big moment, and ended up being fine. And I played with Dennis, and we became great friends. And he's like one of the greatest human beings, and it all worked out in the end. But that was definitely like a moment that always sticks out. And when anyone tries to, like, says, do you have advice, or what's the best thing you can tell a young musician, I always say, like, this is going to happen for sure, and you're going to be crushed in the moment, whether it's a great thing like that or whether it's a bad thing. Like, there are other stories I have of things that weren't so great. Just remember you love the work. Just remember that you always going to have that, regardless of who's on your resume or who your hero is or who you get to play with and who you don't. You're always going to have the fact that you love the work. And if you can love the work, it doesn't matter when all of those things happen. Because if you love the work, they will happen. And don't worry about the timeline. Doesn't matter. I could be 60 by the time I play with some of my heroes. I'm fine with that. I don't need to be on the road with Jeff Beck every day of the week. I've never played with him, and he's one of my big heroes. I might never play with them. I'm also totally okay with that. So I think it's just those things I've learned from those kind of situations in my life.
Yeah, it's. Can you talk a little bit about your books?
Oh,
because
sure.
you have a number of books, and if you're anything like me, then maybe your books were sort of an outgrowth of your teaching, to maybe codify aspects of your teaching, or maybe you have a different.
No, process. For sure it was that. I mean, let's be very clear to anyone who's watching or listening right now. Yes, I have a lot of books, but they're not like deep and philosophical and eloquently written in terms of the text. They are music teaching books. They are concepts. I throw in a couple of jokes here and there. The only actual book that is 100% text that I've written was You're a Musician, Now What? That was more philosophical and conceptual, and it told more of my story. So that's my disclaimer right there. And I wrote that book because I was going to say I was sick of it. I wasn't sick of it. It was just, I got the question so many times, like, hey, man, how did you build an online empire, for want of a better word? How did you build an online business? How did you do this? How did you build a website? What do you use for a video player? I was like, oh, I can't have this conversation 50,000 more times with all my musician friends. I'm just going to put it in a book and throw it out there, and people can, consume it at their own rate. And then the other stuff, the more technical practice, composition, chordal, melodic, improvisational stuff that I do put in my books is definitely a focus of what I like to teach. It's a more concise way of having it in one place and kind of having it segmented so it doesn't all run into one another. Like, there's a very specific chordal harmony book. Actually, there are 2 of them. And a 2-5-1 book for real specific 2-5-1 vocabulary, which is very different from the pentatonic book I just put out. So it's, you can't please everyone, and not everyone is looking for everything. The last thing I wanted to do was make a book that was like 700 pages thick and call it The Definitive Encyclopedia of Bass Techniques. How many people have done that? And how many times was I disappointed by buying that book and getting like 3 pages in and thinking, there's no direction here? I don't need a ska bass line and then a bass line that's traditional to Benin, West Africa, and then a punk rock Sid Vicious bass line all in the same place. It's too much. So I try and make it as focused and give each book an arc and not exclude anyone. People always email us and say, hey, is this book for beginners? I say, absolutely. It's also for the seasoned professional, because there's a definite arc to it. And it's amazing how many professional musicians I get that email and say, man, I'm still on page 3. I didn't know that I couldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm right there with you. I didn't know that I couldn't do it either. That's why I put it in the book, because that's literally what I'm working on every day. Like, you were asking me what I'm practicing. I am practicing tenths on the bass
Yeah.
guitar every day, because it's simple and it's a foundation and it needs maintaining. It's not all, angular, non-diatonic, chromatic, whatever stuff on the top floating around. It's actually the foundation that needs the most love and care and
Oh.
attention. So
Hmm.
that's why I like to start the books out. Then they get involved. And we've started adding like play alongs, and they always have a video component. So it's kind of growing. But
Yeah.
that's the basic premise behind the whole thing. And it's a ton of fun to do. Like, I genuinely love doing it. Like, and Chelsea works on it with me. She does all the design and stuff, and we can be at each other's throats almost sometimes, because it's a lot of pressure when we have a deadline and you're working together with your wife, your husband. It's a pretty crazy scene, but yeah, we do actually genuinely love doing it. And then it furthers the conversation. We put
Yeah.
out one book, it brings up a ton more questions, and we're like, oh, that's great, that's great, that's great. Let's, synthesize these things and put them in a book and explain those questions, the answer to those questions that people have. So it's an amazing feedback loop that I very much appreciate. I'm very lucky to have that.
Yeah, and I have a couple of your books. Uh,
Oh, cool.
very, very, very well done, and like you said, very, very specific. Targeting a particular idea.
Right.
Um, Now you play on most of the time I see you playing. You're playing on a 5 string, and it has more than 20. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how many frets? 26, 20. How many is that?
Uh,
28.
that's to 8. So I
28.
had to
Okay.
count.
Yeah, 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 yeah. 28 frets,
Yeah.
and your tuning is somewhat unusual. I play with the B string on the bottom on my
Sure.
5 string. You play with the C string on the top.
Yep.
Where E is your lowest string, and I've heard you talk about that. You do that because you like to play chords, and this helps you to
Sure.
be able to play more of those chords. Can you talk a little bit about that particular tuning?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of people are quick to label you a frustrated guitarist. Um, I'm not a frustrated guitarist. I'm actually a very happy guitarist, because I do enjoy playing the guitar. I think it's a little short-sighted to use that label when it comes to the bass. There are a lot of people who play this tuning, for instance, and they always use the phrase, well, Jacko only needed 4 strings. So that's how they justify it one way or the other. Yeah, I'm definitely not, I never feel the need to justify it one way or the other. I just explain it by saying what I hear from my music is in that register.
Right.
And it allows me because I play with a low B, and I have a 6 string, and I play all kinds of different basses for different situations. Unfortunately, those are not the ones where somebody has an Instagram camera in your face, like trying to put you on the internet. They're normally in a studio making real music, probably making real money, not the flashy web-friendly stuff that occurs most of the time. So it affords me, one of the main things it affords me is reharmonization, and that's something I'm super passionate about, and getting the most mileage out of one note. So having this higher range, I can get my melody in that range where the chordal accompaniment is so much more effective, and
Yeah.
that's huge for me. I think that's the biggest benefit of it. Aside from that, I don't know. I like the way it feels. It's a tough one. There's no like real one specific reason. There's no one inspiration. I sometimes think that maybe I should play a 6 string, then I would have even more range. Like, why not? Why stop the philosophy there? If you have range here, have some more low range. I also don't think my hands are that big. They're not miniature, but they're not that big. And it's a comfort thing. Um, and again, it's really specific to my music.
Right.
Like, this is, my signature bass. Like, I helped design it. It's got my
Yep.
name on it. It comes as the Janek Gwizdala bass. Is it the bass I use on absolutely everything? For sure not. Like, I have a 4-string with 3 P bass pickups in it. I have one of Henrik Linde's signature basses, which is a P and jazz setup, which is a 4-string, which is strung down a minor third. Because I'm playing all this heavy rock and gent music right now that I'm writing, like Animals as
Mm.
Leaders, Periphery kind of style music.
Yeah,
So I've
yeah,
got
yeah, yeah,
everything
yeah,
tuned
yeah.
down. I'm playing with a pick. You know, I think maybe my thing gets pigeonholed a little bit because this one's perhaps the most visible so far. And it was the same with the Federa. It hasn't changed that much, but
It's a beautiful instrument, um,
I think so.
and it sounds terrific. I mean, it really. I mean, I've heard you play on different instruments. I heard you play a lot on the Federa
Yeah,
um, before.
17
Uh,
years.
yeah, when you switch to this instrument, there's a certain focus that came, um, and yeah, so it's a beautiful and great sounding instrument. And of course, you sound great on it.
Thank you, man.
Of course, you'd sound great on anything. So, uh, yeah, just accept it, just receive it,
I'll
just
try it.
receive
I'm terrible at it, man. I'm sorry. I'm like I'm Mr. Awkward Silence when that stuff comes on.
um, how about goals for the future? You talked a little bit about, or at least you said something about 6 months to 12 months or something is going to be a big learning curve.
Yeah.
Um, uh, can you talk a little bit about maybe some goals or some projects, maybe maybe personal growth, maybe even things that aren't necessarily
Yeah.
related to music?
100%. I mean, I think the personal growth thing is something, um, probably getting back into therapy on a more regular basis once like one-on-one, you know, speech therapy is possible again. You know, that was something that was huge for me while I was doing it. I was doing it for probably, the most recent stint was like 3.5 years every week. So that's huge for personal growth and something I always recommend to anyone if they're ever on the fence, like, should I go talk to someone? It's great to have someone who's not emotionally involved in your life to really talk to, and someone with a very specific set of skills to help you be
Yeah,
more aware of yourself and work through problems. So it's definitely something that's on the schedule for sure. Um, in and that's something that runs like no matter what, regardless of the music project that I'm on, and whether it's with someone in person or whether that's me working more. Perhaps that's more on trying to do more meditation every day or take time away from the chaos and the mayhem and the inevitable, you know, to focus in on some things. And we are also like we would like to start a family in the not too distant future as well. So there are like massive life changes on the horizon. And then you want to sprinkle in a few musical things. The musical things are almost an afterthought at this point. It's crazy, right? But there are very specific musical things on the horizon. I would love to play some heavier music, and see what my harmonic or melodic sensibilities could bring to that sound. And I have some very specific musicians in mind. I've worked with Tosin Abasi before from Animals as Leaders. He's a good friend of mine. He's an incredible musician. To include him somehow would be a dream because of his just what he brings to that sound. Benny Greb, great friend of mine, German drummer, for instance, would be an interesting combination. Just playing stuff that's super wide,
hmm
maybe a little obnoxious, but finding the tipping point of obnoxious and bringing it back into the realm of musical. That's
yeah,
sort of what I'm thinking there. And then I'm focusing on the natural sound of the instrument, this specific instrument in a big way. Like that's a
yeah,
constant daily thing of pedals and EQ and compression and preamps and all kinds of stuff to really find where my sound sits the best and how I can really like literally feeling the grooves of my fingerprints in the
hmm
strings, like micro obsessing over how I get the
yeah,
best sound out of the instrument.
yeah.
And then I want to go and do a series of concerts in. Whoa! I just heard a door go. I think that was my wife upstairs. He wants me to go have dinner soon. But yeah, doing a series of live concerts that will be filmed, solo concerts around the world in different places. Japan is high up on my list of places to do it. Um, yeah, stuff like that. It's in the embryonic stages of really kind of getting it together, but that's kind of what's on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, that's the family thing. I went right into the family thing. Um, I have a 6-year-old,
Okay. Wow.
and that's been the most profound experience of my life. And it's actually really helped me to put some things in perspective.
Right, I can imagine.
Um, and it's a beautiful thing. It's just a beautiful thing. So God bless you, and you know, that's a that's like a wonderful thing. I'm just maybe like in, I don't know, in a few years we'll have another conversation,
Yeah.
and I'll be like,
I'll look
hey
about
man,
20 years older,
yeah, yeah,
total lack of sleep.
yeah, yeah.
For
Um,
sure.
is there anything that you wanted to say that that I didn't ask you about?
Oh man, I mean, that's always the crazy thing, right? There are probably 1,000 more things.
Oh yeah,
Um, Off the top of my head, I don't know. Man, I'm always just happy um, to have conversations like this. So I appreciate the opportunity, the platform. I appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate the fact that we have such a great friend in common in Victor Wooten. Long may that exist. Uh, you know, um, and yeah, I don't know. I think I've probably, in the moment, I've probably said everything I can say today. With
yeah.
the great questions and the great conversation. Yeah, I'd probably be pushing another 90 minutes of information if I start going again.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, and
Yeah,
um, I pray for you and your family. I pray for our community and
big time.
our country, our world, and I pray for the time that in the day that we can get back on the stage
Yeah,
in front of an audience
absolutely. And
safely.
have conversations like this in person as well would be awesome.
Yes. All right, man.
Well,
Well,
thank you,
thanks
man.
so much. Thanks so much for your time and energy.
Anytime, man. My pleasure.